All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. I'm going to call to order this regular city council meeting for the city of Troutdale on October 8th, 2024. Let's go ahead, and if you join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right, let's take roll call, Sarah.
Okay, Counselor Ritma.
Here.
Counselor Caswell.
Here.
Counselor Wynn.
Present.
Counselor White.
Here.
Counselor Wittrin.
Present.
Counselor Glantz.
Present.
Mayor Lauer.
Here. All right, thank you very much. Do we have an agenda update, Mr. Ray Young?
Mayor, no, the agenda will go forward as presented to the council.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 2, public comment. Public comment on non-agenda and consent agenda items is welcome at this time. Public comment on agenda items will be taken at the time the item is considered. Public comment should be directed to the presiding officer and limited to matters of community interest or related to matters which may or could come before council. Each speaker shall be limited to 5 minutes for each agenda item unless a different amount of time is allowed by the presiding officer with the consent of the council. The council and mayor should avoid immediate or protracted responses to citizen comments. Public comments open. Anybody on Zoom wishes to make public comment, go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record, please.
I guess I'll go first. Good evening, Mayor Lauer. Tanny Staffinson, Troutdale resident. Hey, I'm actually really sorry to be bringing this to you guys, but this is about campaign signs. And I was hoping to just send out an email to the individuals that are running for office and stating some of my concerns or concerns that have been brought my way. But I didn't get an ability to get that email from staff, so here I am. Frankly, I haven't seen this many signs or a sign problem like this since the year that we had 5 sitting councilors running for mayor. You guys probably all remember back when that happened. This is something similar now. And I just got to tell you, it's a little disappointing. I was reading through the I Want to Be a Counselor packet, tab 2, and it talks about signs and it talks about where they can be placed and where they can't be placed. And we always end up with signs in the right of way. And that's just the way that it is. And on Planning Commission, we tried to write sign code. We tried to address these things. And that's why I got some of the calls that I have is it's like, what's going on with the signs? But at the end of the day, I know that we can't. The city, the county, and the state cannot endorse candidates. So we really shouldn't have any signs on city property, city-owned property, state property, right? Or county property. So it's just kind of disappointing to me that we haven't kind of followed that, and we've taken it a step further. Is we as leaderships think that staff doesn't have anything better to do than drive around and take down signs that we've put up. It's just as a citizen, it's just disappointing. And I think that, anytime we're writing ordinances and resolutions about things, we need to understand that they apply to us too. And I'm sorry you guys are hearing this because I'm looking particularly like at Sandy. You're not even running. Randy, I'm sorry, some of you, but it's like it's the only way I can get this out there. And so apologize for this forum, but that's my rant for this evening.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Staffinson. I appreciate it. All right. Anybody else on Zoom wishes to make public comment, go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record, please. All right. Not seeing anybody. Anybody in council chambers tonight wishes to make public comment? All right. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Let's go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3, a presentation for the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission's future planning education session. Norm Thomas and Autumn Carter and Reed Wagner are presenting. go ahead and approach the table. Yes, good evening.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and council members. It's nice to be here. I'm Norm Thomas. I am your representative on the Mountain Cable Regulatory Commission. And we're here tonight to kind of give you some ideas of what we're working on and a little bit of briefing on the changing landscape of what's going on with data communications and communications in general. Normally I'd be here talking budget numbers. Tonight you don't have to listen to that, and because you already approved it and nothing's really changed. So if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to give me a call. At this point, I'll turn it over.
If you wouldn't mind pulling one of those, or that little black box right there is also a microphone for both of you.
Thanks, Norm.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm Reed Wagner. I'm a partner in Next Strategies, and my other partner, Autumn Carter, is going to be presenting online today. We're here as a consulting team that's supporting in the strategic planning of the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, and rethinking about the IGA that was last looked at in 1998. The world's changed quite a bit since then, so it's taking quite a bit of proactive thought to think about what should the future role of the commission, the IGA, and the partnership across 6 jurisdictions look like going forward. I'm going to start with some quick introductions, and I'll start with Autumn. Do you want to introduce yourself online?
Sure. Autumn Carter, Managing Partner for Next Strategies. I'll be presenting today, and I'm looking forward to sharing more of the work with you. So I won't take too much time, but I will pass the mic to Chair DeGraw, who's also online.
Hello, thank you so much for that introduction, Autumn. Yeah, my name is Julia DeGraw. I'm the chair of the MHCRC and also representative from Portland on the MHCRC, and I am, really passionate about the role we play in serving the public in ensuring that we are getting the most benefit from the public right of way. It's always a delight being able to issue grants to community organizations from the money that we're able to receive from Comcast and really bring value to our communities. It's really what brings me to this table, and I'm really excited to work with all of you and hear this discussion and continue, imagining how this can continue moving forward. It's going to need to be different than how we've done it in the past ultimately, but I'm really eager to dive into this process with all of you. So thank you for having me, and I'm interested in hearing these presentations and also available during Q&A to participate at that level as well. So thank you for having me, and I will pass it back.
Great, and we have a subject matter expert in the room too, with Kathleen Lefevre from Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission. And then we have John from Metro East here joining us today as well.
John Lockton, Director of Production Services, and I'm joined by David Elton Brown, Director of Technology.
Welcome.
So,
Thank you.
So we're going to spend a little time talking about Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission's key role as a cable industry regulator, community media funder, and policy advocate. We're going to learn about the changing landscape in the cable industry and how that's impacting the Cable Regulatory Commission, and thus impacting the revenues that come through and maybe the structure of what is in place now. And I just want to emphasize the importance of proactively exploring this. We're going to see how revenues and costs are starting to merge, and that we don't want to be reactive, we want to be proactive, and that's what the Cable Regulatory Commission has talked about from the beginning of our conversations with them. So with that, I'd like to pass it off to John to talk a little bit about Metro East, because it's so much of what the community feels on the ground locally, and then we'll talk a little bit about the market.
Great, thank you. So good evening, Mayor and councillors again. Thanks for having us. What I wanted to do is, rather than just kind of like, as Norm said, well, we normally only come here at the budget time, or we're here to cover the meetings. It's like, I want to tell you a little bigger story about what we actually are up to at Metro East. So we're a nonprofit community media center, and a big thing we do is we teach people how to create their own media. We have a studio, we have edit suites, we have a music recording booth or a podcast recording booth at our studio in Gresham. We have youth workshops, internships, volunteer opportunities, and monthly workshops available. And you create your own show, volunteer on a show. But the thing is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reach people with media education at all different ages. As young as 5 or 6, I've seen 90-year-olds editing. It's absolutely amazing, I can assure you. And it's across the board, it doesn't matter. We're just trying to get this education thing going. That said, yeah, we have a membership model, but it's exceptionally affordable. It's $100 for the year, or 25 if you're a student or a veteran, or da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But we're not going to use that as a barrier. We're always going to let you through the door. We're always going to let you check out the gear. That's our main thing. You know, when we offer scholarships, if you can't afford it, I suppose is a way of putting it. And when you pay that fee, it covers you for a year. For classes, you don't get it the first time, take the class again, you know, give it another go, or check out the gear that isn't your thing. Oh, you're in front of camera. Let's find out how we can get that to happen. So that's just gives you an idea of what's going on there. But we're also in schools all the way through. Middle to high is a bit of a sweet spot, but that's where we're working. From the nonprofit side of things, we have an Emmy-nominated production team. We make videos to promote nonprofits. We really help people tell their story. And that's what the education piece is also about. It's about teaching people to tell their story. It's really valuable. And especially when that transition, that language started to happen 10 years ago, it just came from the advertising world. It's just telling a story. That's all you're doing. So we make educational videos, how-to videos, documentaries, and all of this we kind of plow back in. It's a nonprofit, so we're not making any money, but we plow it back into our mission of civic engagement, diverse voices, and most of all, trying to strengthen the community. We've recently started doing project-based media cohorts, so switching it up a little, take a group of folks, get them working on their project, and take them all the way through to completion. Has been very, very successful. So kind of summing it up, we do 3 main things. Government, obviously, municipal, however you want to call it. We work with 5 different jurisdictions, whether it be a board meeting, planning commission, or et cetera, et cetera. We do a couple of school districts, Gresham and Reynolds School District. And as I've said, we teach. This is the second thing we do. Workshops on all kinds of different medias, from, you know, iPads to the most complicated studio camera. We can teach you how to do that. And we make professional videos for nonprofits, schools, and a whole range of folks. And everything we do, we try and involve our DEI, our diversity and our equity and inclusion, and trying to bring that all together. And most importantly, get it on the channels. So that's a little big picture, small overview of what we can do. Read.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll have time at the end for questions, if you have questions of John. Before I pass it off to Autumn, I think we're getting our slide deck up. I just want to thank your city manager, Ray Young, for helping us understand the dynamics of the city and the kind of history of what's going on. So Autumn, I'm going to pass it off to you, and I think we're going to start on the next slide.
It's been years and I still can't unmute. So thank you so much. So thank you to the council. Thank you, Mayor Lauer, for having us this evening. And we decided to start this presentation with some background about Metro East and its role as a community media center, because what we'll cover today is a lot of the technical elements of what the MHCRC as a commission is, what its role is as a regulator and as a policy advocate and as a manager of PEG fees. But we wanted to start with some of the why. how does this look in community and it manifests, especially the beneficiaries. So essentially, where does that revenue go and what benefit does it have to the public? But there are other considerations as well that are impacting the future of the commission and ultimately your jurisdiction, Troutdale, and all of the member jurisdictions of the MHCRC. So we want to emphasize the importance of just having the member jurisdictions proactively explore options for the commission's future and its impact on local communities. So we are here to discuss the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission and its strategic planning process. As part of the background materials, we sent a video covering the Mobile Media Lab, a Metro East initiative, as well as a background presentation that underscores some of what John covered. We encourage you to review some of those and of course follow up with any questions, especially at the end or after this presentation. And we will, as we walk through today in the agenda, we'll focus on, we've already done some introductions and I'll provide a bit of background into commission. We'll walk through some of the financial and industry dynamics facing the commission. And I want to provide an overview of the strategic planning process, the decision-making process, and some of the considerations we'd like to put before the council. And then we'll wrap with just how we are approaching next steps. So as part of our objectives today, we specifically want to focus on the commission's background. So that includes the role it plays on behalf of its member jurisdictions. We also want to, again, walk through the financial industry dynamics and trends shaping the commission's future, and that will focus on how it is navigating in an increasingly digital landscape. And as we outline that decision-making process, we want to provide an update on where we are, but then also share how we anticipate navigating that process, key strategic issues, and how we would like the jurisdictions to be involved. I'll start with a bit of background into the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, MHCRC. I'll call it that from now on, but we just want to make sure that folks who are at home are aware. So it was established through an intergovernmental agreement, an IGA, in 1992, with the mission to advocate for and protect the public interest in the regulation and development of cable communication systems. And the member jurisdictions are Troutdale, as well as Multnomah County, Gresham, Fairview, Wood Village, and City of Portland. And I know earlier we started this meeting with a discussion of the right-of-way. One of the major issues that the MHCRC contends with is the use of the right-of-way and how member jurisdictions want to manage it going forward. So there are three core roles that we want to consider. And we should keep in mind that these are the core roles that the MHCRC has played over the years, and these are shifting. They are shifting amid changes in the landscape from a regulatory perspective and from an economic perspective. And so, but as we look at those three core roles and how they exist today, and how they've existed over the course of the last 3 decades, the MHCRC exists to negotiate and enforce cable franchise agreements. It leverages collective influence on behalf of its members to negotiate for the strongest agreements possible on behalf of the public. As an example, the commission has successfully negotiated around fees, customer service protections, reporting requirements for cable providers, insurance and bonding requirements, technical standards, and other concessions on behalf of its members. It takes in revenue, and through that revenue is able to provide funding to support PEG access, so that's public education and governmental access, through community media centers like Metro East, as well as community grants to other recipients in the community. The MHCRC itself manages and distributes the funding that's derived from both PEG fees and franchise fees. And then finally, it serves a role as an advocate, advocating on behalf of the public interest to advance cable policy objectives at the local, state, and federal level. So as we look to the future, the commission is actively considering the cable market and needs across Multnomah County, the regulatory landscape beyond Multnomah County, so especially what's happening in other states and what's happening at the federal level, It's looking at potential options to reconfigure the intergovernmental agreement. For instance, does it make sense to reconsider, replace, dissolve, or otherwise alter that agreement, especially as we look at how these roles are shifting? And then ultimately, it's looking at the role of the commission itself. So if we look at the shifts in this role over time, we note some key dynamics. There's a shift towards more digital video consumption, and that has really accelerated over the last decade, and it's changed the way the commission has approached its roles. Some dynamics to be aware of. Effectively, there's only one cable provider remaining in the market today. That's restricting competition for those seeking cable services. We'll walk through some of these dynamics later in the presentation, but you should expect to see, unsurprisingly, declines in cable subscribers, and thus PEG and franchise fees for community media centers. And there are dynamics that have led to consolidation from a technology perspective in the market.
Do you mind if I interject?
No, go ahead, please.
Autumn, I just wanted you to know you're stuck a few slides back, and so you may want to jump them forward.
Do you see what are PEG fees?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll just define PEG fees just briefly so that members of both of council and the public are aware. So franchise fees, so the MHCRC collects public educational and government PEG fees on behalf from cable companies on behalf of its 6 member jurisdictions. So all franchise cable companies pay 3% of their gross revenues related to TV services to the commission as dedicated funding for capital costs of providing community media and technology services to the community. And this 3% is separate from the 5% in franchise fees. But together, these have been terms that are negotiated by the commission. And the franchise fees themselves are payments to the jurisdictions for use of the public right-of-way. That's really core to understand. And so when we talk about what it means to regulate the right-of-way going forward, this is why it's such a major consideration for jurisdictions. These fees are important. They support the operations of community media centers. They provide funding for public access channels and producing educational programming. PEG fees also support the technology grants to underrepresented communities to increase access to media resources. And John spoke to this earlier, but just to recap, community media centers provide media and broadband technology for training, tools, and distribution platforms to diverse communities. They broadcast educational and governmental programs, distribute video programs on a variety of digital platforms as well. So there are 2 community media centers serving this broad region, Metro East for the East County jurisdictions and Open Signal for Multnomah County and the city of Portland. Both provide live coverage of city council meetings like this one, as well as other governmental activities. So as we've discussed, the MHCRC is facing a shifting environment as cable subscribers decline. Its regulatory authority is growing less defined over time, and financial challenges impact jurisdictions and community partners. It is essential that member jurisdictions identify a new strategy and a funding approach. So to walk through some of these drivers with a bit more detail, we ultimately are looking at a shift in technology. So on the ground, infrastructure needs are shifting and industry services are still rapidly evolving. The industry players are also shifting. So while Comcast is the last remaining provider of cable, as Ziply Fiber is exiting the market, and still Ziply, Comcast, they have very few traditional TV subscribers. They're really, they're becoming increasingly broadband subscribers. They essentially have taken over traditional cable services, not 100% yet, but that trend is well underway. There are also larger policy dynamics at play as well surrounding net neutrality. We also see declining cable revenues. So cable subscriber losses reduce critical franchise fee revenues. The commission itself relies on this, as so too do the media centers, as we described earlier. With the consolidation, we see fewer service providers. That's restricting market competition, and that results in implications for customers, for members of the community. At this point, there's no local authority based on federal regulations. Local governments do not have the authority to regulate broadband providers. So as we look at the shift and having broadband overtake traditional cable services, we are dealing with an outdated regulatory framework to be able to have the commission serve as an effective regulator, one of its 3 core roles. And then ultimately, those reduced cable fees, both PEG and franchise, as discussed earlier, threaten the sustainability of media centers who comprise the largest portion of recipients for grant dollars from the commission. To visualize these dynamics, this chart shows the decline in cable TV subscribers over time. You see a plateau that's remaining fairly steady up until 2016. If you remember, this is when Netflix starts to emerge, but also we see streaming essentially starts to take over. So between cord cutting and also the shift in providers and technology, the number of cable subscribers has been on the decline. And franchise and PEG fees are calculated as a percentage of gross revenues derived from cable TV services. So while a dip in subscribership would all be offset by annual service rate increases imposed by the providers, despite those rate increases, more and more people are just choosing to let go of their video, get their video content not through traditional methods like a set-top box, but via online streamers. The most recent numbers that don't show up here are for April of last year, so that officially there are fewer than 100,000 subscribers county-wide. This slide shows the amount the MHCRC collects as franchise fees for East County jurisdictions, and those are passed back to the jurisdictions as revenues. So while the revenues are declining, the costs have remained flat, but are still increasing as operating costs for the commission itself. And so we'd anticipate these lines will converge at some point. At some point, revenues will not be sufficient to cover the cost of operating the commission as it exists. That may be 3 to 5 years out, but there is no real telling. But we do know with a high degree of certainty that they will converge. And then finally, this slide shows PEG fee revenue. So that's the money collected to support capital payments to OpenSignal, Metro East, and other community technology recipients of the Community Technology Grants Program. That same trend shows that steady downward decline. So from here, I'll pass it on to Reed, who will walk through the overall strategic planning and decision-making process to give you a glimpse of how we're approaching this work. Reed?
Thank you. Sorry. So a lot going on, a lot of dynamics in the market, in the regulatory space. The commission is now working together to come up with options moving forward. But that's not going to be done in a vacuum. Each of the jurisdictions need to be involved. And you probably want to know what the other jurisdictions are also thinking throughout this process. So over the next 4 to 6 months, what we're going to be doing is hosting the conversation with the commission, trying to pull staff from multiple jurisdictions together to have a conversation, and then updating you throughout the process so that you can be informed on how to move forward with the IGA, if you decide to move forward with an IGA going forward. So let's go with the next slide, please. So here are some of the most important questions for the commissioners. Should the commission be maintained under the current structure that it is? Could it be a different structure? Does it just need staff supporting the IGA? How do you manage the right-of-way on behalf of the jurisdictions? Is that something that should fall back into the jurisdiction's hands when it comes to capable regulatory responsibilities? Or should that remain with a commission? Should the commission, on behalf of the jurisdictions, pursue broadband regulation. It's not currently the authority, and it would take advocacy at the federal level for things to change there, but that's a question. Should we secure additional funding for community media? If we're going to see declining revenues and PEG fees, what does that mean to the impact to the community? And how do you reallocate resources going forward? So next slide, please. So basically the options are maintaining the status quo, which is the current IGA and commission as it is, to reallocating or restructuring, or pursuing expanding authority and taking on new responsibilities as a commission. Next slide, please. So some of the key questions. Commission structure. As the cable rate revenues decline, how does the purpose of the commission change? What percentage of the franchise fees are jurisdictions willing to continue to contribute to cable oversight? And do member jurisdictions see a need to remain coordinated to collectively advocate, plan, and negotiate telecommunication services? So next steps, as I mentioned at the top of these slides, we're going to be involved in the next 4 to 6 months with staff, with the commissioners, and with each of the jurisdictions, sharing information, trying to get a lot smarter with this and be able to make decisions moving forward. It's been since 1998 since that IGA has been updated, and a lot has changed. So I think there's a lot to consider moving forward. And we don't think about this stuff every day, but we all have experienced the change in the market. Where we go to get our media, where our kids go to get our media, get their media. And there's an impact to how the cities collect and also distribute funds associated with that. So with that, I'll leave it for questions, if you have any, either about process or about the industry in general. We have people that can answer those questions.
If I could get the screen back, please and thank you. Thank you. All right, any comments or questions from council? Councilor White?
Yeah, I was just curious if you had any success stories with the program. Has anybody gone on to make a career out of this, or become an influencer, or anything like that?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, there was a raft that came through at the same time. There was about 3 young men who were involved in a news program that we produced that have all gone on, each individually at some stage has worked in broadcast news. Since then, we've had a couple of viral videos, you know, and we had some very successful wrestling for a while, which was super, super popular. But they never quite went on and kind of made it, but they definitely know how to get in a room with some of the top wrestlers. So, yeah, there's been a few folks, yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah.
On top of the Troutdale City Council.
Yeah,
Of course,
obviously.
that eclipses everybody else's.
Of course.
That goes without
I
saying.
used to tell Keith he should run for governor because he's the most informed in the state. You know, what is it, like 420 meetings? I saw it in your report.
Yeah, but
That's a lot.
there's an incredible fact. We had a young woman who'd come through one of our contractor programs, and she'd never been at a municipal meeting before. And we actually had to take like real cameras and we're going to switch it live down there. And at the end of it, she was basically like, that was fascinating. And I said, yeah, every single producer that goes out, it's to us, it's a story you're telling about your city. And that's why we get so engaged with it. And, you know, it was just amazing to hear somebody just, yeah, got it. So.
Councilor Glantz?
You have a couple questions. When you talk about right-of-way and how some of that gets, I guess, lease charged, is that just for cable or is that for other types of like phone communication or things like that?
So
So There are other services associated with it, but for the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, what their responsibility is limited to the cable. So that associated with what you see on your cable TV.
But
So
there's plenty of, but there's plenty of things that are in the right of way, gas, you know, electric, whatever can be put underground is technically in the right of way. And is taxed or could be taxed.
But specifically, the commission's regulatory scope does not include any of the other use of the right of way, including fiber that is used to deliver broadband services. Even if that same fiber, even if that same cable is used to also deliver cable services, the scope, so this is why it does matter if what someone is receiving is defined as cable or if it's just defined as video that is streamed that looks a lot like cable but is actually broadband services.
that was going to be my next follow-up question. Was, you know, it's the same hole in the wall, so how is it different?
From a federal perspective, it is different, though your mileage may vary when it comes to that perspective.
And quick question, when some of these shows are made, do the people who make the show have all the rights? I'm gonna jump ahead here. I mean, a lot of this stuff, if you can get some good stuff on like YouTube, you can get a little bit of income from some of those views that are watched, or do you block that as like nonprofit or something?
So how we are traditionally set up is that any program that is made, you know, obviously goes to cable. But because you're the producer, you come into our studio and you make your show, you own that in the end. So yes, you could put it on YouTube and you could make some revenue.
Okay. Thank you.
Julia DeGraw, you get your hand up. Please go ahead, Chair.
Thank you. Yes. This is the challenge, I think, of not being in the room, maybe is interjecting myself into the conversation. But I did want to jump in on the right-of-way question, because I'm in a special space on being able to have, you know, thoughts and opinions about the right-of-way issues. And the bottom line is, yes, we are limited to just cable, but as Autumn very clearly illustrated, you know, that same broadband is being used to deliver very similar services in a different format on the same broadband, right? And so essentially our authority hasn't really caught up with the technology shift, even though the same services are being provided differently. And it's, you know, we're designed to represent the public interest in regulating, you know, the cable, you know, companies. And I think ideally, like the way I'm approaching this process in partnership with the municipalities is I want to make sure that we do what we can to attempt to continue to be able to regulate or gain some of that benefit for the public and the community that gets us outside of the cable box, right? And that we're going to think really creatively about how we do that collectively. But it is one of the things I'm really passionate about, is trying to make sure that we are collectively figuring out how to best move forward differently so that we can continue, you know, serving the public and the public good when private corporations are benefiting from this right of way, right? So to provide very similar services than they were doing with cable. So I'm just going to speak from my perspective on like what I'm hoping to accomplish together as we, you know, work on this moving forward together.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from council? Councilor Wittrin.
Yeah, just a little clarifying question. I'm not sure if it's for Ray or for the group here, but with the IGA and the declining income coming in and expenses going up and those two lines getting ready to intersect, is it, and if we as a group are not reactive soon enough, Ray or the panel, could the city be on the hook for an actual expense down the road? The way the IGA is written.
Cities can't be done.
I just want to know what our exposure is.
Well, first of all, Norm has a comment, but Ed is of the opinion that we can't be the ones who indemnify them, so we would never be liable for it, even though it comes out of our share. It's only based upon us getting a share to share, or so to speak.
One of the interesting things about the IGA is it's a group of 6 jurisdictions that created the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission. And then we do drive our staff from the city of Portland. We basically contract the city of Portland. But each jurisdiction has the option, if they want to, they can drop out at any time of the IGA. Now, there's probably some notice requirements, a few other things that happen. And then you would then pick up all the responsibility. When we manage and we create or bring you a franchise proposal, when that's ratified, that franchise belongs to each city, but we manage it as a service for being part of it within the RGA. That way you don't have to take the customer complaints, follow up with all the issues that go on. And we can levy fines if we need to. Don't like to, but we will. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
I think so.
Councilor Rittman.
Well, you've made a strong case for the continued funding of the MHCRC and Metro East and the services you provide through just cable franchise fees isn't going to last. It's obviously not going to keep working. And so I wondered if basically, has any place granted a commission like you guys authority to regulate broadband? I just wondered, is that a realistic, does that require federal legislation or something? Or?
It does.
Yes,
Autumn, go ahead.
yes. The short answer is yes. There are attempts across the country, and there's discussion at the federal level, but this is in flux, and there are also politics involved. There are changes in opinions. It's at the federal level. It's regulated today. There is no authority for local jurisdictions to regulate broadband providers. It's treated differently than cable.
Yeah.
And potentially Rebecca Gibbons, who's in the room, can speak to this with greater detail, but there are cases that are working their way through the courts to try to advocate or to try to make the case for this as a right that local jurisdictions should have, but it is unsettled law. One of the options that was displayed, if you remember the chart that had the narrower types of options and strategies and the broader ones. On the right side, there was the broader side. And there was the case of, as jurisdictions, the members deciding that they are interested in actively pursuing the right to regulate broadband. That is probably a longer game. It is fraught with legal and probably political implications, but it may accomplish that longer term sustainability approach, whether or not it's done through the MHCRC or through the jurisdictions through some other method. And then on the narrower side, there probably was maybe if there's less interest in pursuing the regulatory authority, perhaps there are ways to restructure, to look at ways to not have those lines converge, the revenue and the cost, right? Looking at options to reallocate resources or to restructure the agreement. But the big takeaway is that the responsibility to regulate cable, as long as there are cable subscribers, still will fall to the jurisdictions, and managing the use of the right of way will still fall to the jurisdictions. One of the key questions is whether or not you choose to do that independently outside of the IGA, outside of the commission, the current commission structure, or whether you look for other alternatives.
Well, I for one think the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission has served Troutdale very well over the years. I'm sorry to see it fading into the distance as a realistic operation, but so far it's been really good for Troutdale. We've had excellent representation.
Well, thank you.
And our citizens have profited from it, and service has been whatever it is, good, bad, or indifferent. But since it's coming to an end, I wondered if the commission and this is probably something you don't want to discuss yet, but I'm just going to throw out the question, do you have any recommendations for what to do?
That's the purpose of hiring the contractors to help us sort that out.
Okay.
You know, we're not saying that the commission is dead, but, you know, if you look at the trends of what's happening, you know, with the survivorship and the
Yeah.
fees, most time will be protected a little bit because as the companies raise their rates, it tends to make up for what we lose. But in the long term, that's not going to happen. And if you look around, you know, it used to be it was the younger generation that was abandoning anything that was landline locked. And now you're finding that even in the older generations, when you get, you know, in an RV park in, say, Arizona or something, 90% of them are using broadband.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going back to the old cable, they're not using the landlines for phone. You know, and these rules were written way back when phone was a twisted pair across fence posts that made it up, and cable was a single wire with a shield around it, and that was it. And when broadband came, or fiber optics came in and replaced all that backbone, it doesn't care what goes down it. And so you got video signals, you got telephone, you got data stuff. So that's in lies the issue. And the rules as written originally by the FCC don't meet what the requirement is today. So that's really the crux, I think, of what we're trying to get at with what would you like to see the commission do? Hopefully that helps.
And while we don't have suggestions today, I do know that staff is working hard to put together some scenarios. It'll also have legal considerations throughout each of these scenarios. And that will allow some vibrant conversations, I think, going forward.
Yeah.
Good, thanks.
Julia, I would like to jump in too with a quick response to that question, which is, while we see that trend of the lines starting to converge eventually, I feel really confident that right now we have the time to take the time to be really thoughtful and actually proactive instead of just reactive. And that's why I've been, you know, from the beginning of this presentation, kind of framing it up as an opportunity to lean in together and figure this out together, because we didn't wait until the last minute, and we really do have an opportunity to be intentional about how we approach this issue, as it, you know, before it's, you know, do or die time, so to speak. So yeah, it was a good question, and it looks like you're ready to roll up your sleeves, and I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we're not asking for a decision tonight, we just want to give you the information, and we'll bring back more stuff that, at that point, then there'll be decisions made.
Okay.
But it's going to be with interactions with the cities. We're not going to go out and just say, you know, put something in the frying pan, bake it, and hand it to you, say, here it is, like it or lump it. And we don't want to do that. We want to come in with what's going to work best for each of the communities.
Any other comments or questions from council? All right, if there's no more comments or questions, I'm going to open it up to public comment really quick, unless there's another comment from the panelists. Okay. All right, public comment on agenda item number 3 in the presentation for Mountain Hood Cable Regulatory Commission is open. If you are on Zoom and wish to make public comment, go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record, please, and thank you.
Hi there. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Katmiel Garcia. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I'm currently the Director of Community Media at Open Signal, Portland Community Media Center. I'm also, in my other day job, I am sitting on the board. It's a national board called the Alliance for Community Media. And the Alliance for Community Media is supported by a foundation that does lobbying work in DC. So twice a year I travel to DC to talk with our representatives, Congress folks, and their staff about protecting community media and supporting community media. And I just wanted to give a little more information about some of the states that are pushing through some federal legislation where they're basically looking at the language that's already in existence for the cable broadband franchise fees, and they're just simply replacing cable with video streaming. So those states are Michigan, Minnesota, and Vermont. So there is, I just want to give that extra information. There is traction federally with federal legislation looking into that. And I just really appreciate the commission. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else on Zoom? Go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record, please. Okay, anybody in council chambers? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
Really
for the
appreciate
information.
it. I'm sure we'll be getting back with you soon.
Okay.
Feel free to call me if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
discussion. All right, let's go ahead and move on to agenda item number 4, a resolution accepting the main streets on Halsey Cross Section and street design plan. Erica Palmer and Marley Boxler. Thank you very much. Good evening.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Erica Palmer, Community Development Director, and I have Marley Boxler, Economic Development Coordinator here this evening. She was the last project lead on this project. So she can fill in some information that I might not have in the back of my brain because I wasn't here throughout the whole scope of this project. And I do want to recognize that we have Matt Bell from Kittleson Associates, who was the project consultant online this evening, as well as Allison Boyd and Brad Choi from Multnomah County. They're here to answer questions as well. So with that, tonight before you, you have a resolution to accept the cross-section and street design plan for Halsey. So this evening, in this brief presentation, we'll just review the cross-section and street design plan. We'll go over the plan background, the scope of the project, get into the plan recommendations, and then briefly talk about implementation and funding. And then you can consider whether or not to accept the resolution. Oops, let's go forward. So plan background. This work really stems from work that was done in 2017 from the Main Streets on Halsey project. This is a coordinated effort to look at the Halsey corridor from about 202nd to 257th, which is a 3.5 mile stretch of roadway. This plan is a conceptual plan. It's the first baby step. It's the community vision for what the community would like to see along the Halsey corridor and how it's designed. So by no means or measure is the county going to go out there tomorrow or within the next couple of months and, you know, start making this plan come to fruition. There's a lot of additional steps involved. But in order to get to those additional steps, you have to have a plan. So it's like that chicken and egg approach that we oftentimes have in planning. So project coordination. This project was spearheaded by the 3 cities, Fairview, Wood Village, and Troutdale. We had a project management team that consisted of city staff, Multnomah County transportation staff, and also ODOT. We had a project advisory committee. That committee was made up of residents throughout the entire 3 cities and also business owners and local organizations to provide input throughout every phase of this project. And we also had a technical advisory committee, and the technical advisory committee was made up of other public organizations such as TriMet and our emergency service providers for them to give input on the plan as it unfolded over the last 2.5 years. Yep. Community engagement. There was a lot of community engagement on this plan. We went out to businesses along the corridor to talk to businesses about this plan and what it would entail over time. We had booths at the First Friday events at Fairview on the Green, at different community events in each 3 of the cities. And then there were also some public engagement outreach tools that we had online for people to submit input. We had a community survey, and we had a community project website as well, in addition to interactive maps that people could play with and look at different options for the roadway. So there are about 7 project objectives in the plan, and I'm not going to go through every single objective, but the main objective for the plan is how do we create a safe roadway for all modes of travel, for vehicles, transit, pedestrians, cyclists, and how do we make sure that the street is designed for the land use context that it abuts. So we took this plan to Planning Commission last month. We heard from the commission that safety is the _1 priority. We want Halsey to be safe for all modes of travel. They liked having 3 lanes on Halsey because it provided, safety for emergency vehicles, and it provided some congestion relief along the roadway, especially when McMinimans has, their busy concert nights. They really thought lighting was important, and it should be incorporated at all bus stops and crossings. Maybe even the plan could look at solar down the road and how we could implement some additional green measures. They looked at, we'll talk about this in just a couple slides, but in the commercial segment of the plan, they talked about how maybe a parking management might be needed down the road for that section. So overall, Planning Commission was, generally supportive of the plan. So getting into the recommendations this evening, this is the project area. Like I said, it extends between all 3 cities from about 202nd to, the 257th here in Troutdale. And what we're gonna focus on is the Troutdale segment of the roadway. And so it includes 3 segments. We have what we call the Edgefield segment, and then we have a residential segment and a commercial segment. So I'm going to talk about the Edgefield segment first. This slide right here is the cross section for kind of a near-term solution for that segment. I don't know how many of you have crossed the street and you have utilized the bus stop right there in front of Edgefield. There's it's unimproved on both sides of the street, with not a sidewalk. Cars are whizzing by. You only have a short section of pavement width. And I think Marley was even saying to the Planning Commission, some of the roadway is kind of like sloughing off.
Yeah, the road sort of, right where the bus stop is, enough people have stopped and waited for that bus over the years that the road has eroded away from it. So you can actually use the street as a chair, waiting for the bus stop. So you can sit on the pavement and use it as a chair, which I have witnessed people doing while they wait for the bus.
So a near-term solution would be extending the shoulders and making sure that there's 6 feet of shoulder on each side, and having 2 lanes of travel at 11 feet in each direction. So right now that would mean, reducing the travel lanes to 11 feet instead of 12 feet. And I have my ruler on my chair back there. I forgot to bring it up, but it's about, this much in each travel lane of a reduction.
And one thing to note on this is that during this planning process, the county really identified that it was important to have a near-term solution and a long-term solution, because there could be funding available in the short term to do some minor improvements. And so we really needed to identify what could we do very quickly versus what is the long-range plan for the entire street. So when we present these, you'll see the near-term cross-section are things that actually could turn around and be implemented rather quickly. And then the long-term solutions are what our plans are for the long-term future. And so a lot of these near-term items are painting, like changing lines, doing things really quickly and at low cost so that we could make some improvements quickly, but not but recognizing that's not the like end all be all, and that we have a future plan for more improvements. And the Edgefield section is a bit difficult with the topography, but yeah, this is the near-term solution for Edgefield.
So getting into the long-term cross-section for this segment, the long-term cross-section shows 3 travel lanes of travel. We have 2 12-foot curb height travel lanes with a 12-foot center turn lane. We have a 6-foot landscape strip on both sides of the street, along with a 6-foot bike lane and a 6-foot sidewalk area. So here's the bird's eye view of the long-term solution for Edgefield here. So as you can see, there is an improved crosswalk in the area, and an improved bus shelter, also with additional lighting. The planter strips and the bike and pedestrian lanes.
And one of the things that we had a lot of conversations about with the county, and that did come up a number of times in planning commission, was regarding maintenance. And one of the things that this plan doesn't do is it does not state you must plant this specific thing this specific way in these planter strips. And so when we've had conversations with McMenamins, we've used the planter strips as an opportunity to be really creative and allow them to, you know, they've got wonderful gardeners that they pay for, and they're very concerned about the aesthetic of their gardens. And so this is another opportunity for them to get really creative and do something with that space that is really special, and potentially other properties as they redevelop might be interested in following some of the same planting plans or incorporating some of the same sort of landscaping styles. So that is one of the areas where there's a bit of creativity and flexibility still there.
So moving on to the residential and commercial segments, there is a small residential segment within our area. And once again, it shows the 3 lanes of travel, just like the previous Edgefield segment, with the 3 travel lanes, the 6-foot landscape strip, and the bike and ped area on both sides. So here is, again, kind of the bird's eye view of the residential segment with all the different improvements. Once again, lighting, you know, is important. And this shows, you know, an additional crossing in that area. And we'll talk about crossings here in just a minute. So now moving on to the commercial segment here in Troutdale. The commercial segment is not a lengthy segment within the Troutdale entire segment area along Halsey. The commercial, this is the bird's eye view. So once again, this is showing, you know, better medians and better crossings. And this bird's eye view shows parking on one side of the street. However, there are 2 options in the plan for the commercial area. The commercial A segment has parking on one side of the street. Once again, you have those, you know, the 2 travel lanes and the center turn lane. And then segment B shows parking on both sides of the street, getting rid of the turning lane and having 2 travel lanes. You know, both segments have benefits and drawbacks. I know that we heard from the Planning Commission that, you know, it may be nice to have parking on both sides of the street. And that's something that, you know, the county would have to look at down the road when this plan really gets refined in that area.
Yeah, and with the options too, I think that one of the areas where we know something like this will come up is in the Troutdale section. you're probably familiar with the section of Halsey that's between the Shell station and, well, actually, it's a section of Historic Columbia River Highway, Halsey ends. It's from the Shell station to 257th, and the right-of-way isn't always consistent. Like the center line of Halsey isn't always consistently in the middle of the right-of-way. And in that particular area, the way the right-of-way is laid out and the way the buildings have then been built adjacent to the south side of Historic Columbia River Highway, without a significant taking of property from a private owner, which we don't want to do, you wouldn't be able to put on-street parking there. It can't align with the intersection. So that would be one of those instances where you'd have parking on the north side of the street, but you wouldn't have it on the south side of the street. And that's simply to accommodate the existing right-of-way and not wanting to cause an extreme detriment to the users of the road and the adjacent property owners. So working within the framework that we have as we've been discussing right-of-way tonight.
Yeah, so this is the long-term cross-section for commercial that shows parking on both sides of the roadway. I know that the Community Advisory Committee, talked about, the preferred bike lane layout for this plan and having it separated from the roadway and all the benefits that it provides users. Marley, do you want to say anything in addition?
Yeah, bike lanes came up a lot, and there was a lot of different considerations, both with the bike and pedestrian and planter and curbs, and where do we put all of these things and what makes the most sense. And you can drive it down a bunch of different streets and see it done in many different ways, but the consensus from the public was very clear that if they had their say, they wanted the bike lanes to be not adjacent to the road. They liked it adjacent to the sidewalk. They liked the protection that the tree wells were able to provide from the road. They also liked that whenever we do like street sweeping, and if there's debris that's in the road, like think about the gravel that we lay during the snowstorms, that the cars then kick up into the bike lanes. The bike lane being separated from the road with that planter strip allows it to be more clear from obstructions. It does create some challenges with the fact that then the street sweeper can't sweep the lane, so the adjacent property owner is going to have to maintain it the same way they maintain their sidewalks right now, or are responsible for doing that. So it does create a couple of little challenges, but there was a lot of conversation around that, and it really, it created more of a trail-like feel. It felt like it was safer for more users. More families would feel comfortable letting their children ride bikes down the street and getting around town. So that really did come up quite a bit, and we had a lot of discussion around that. And it was also important to create some sort of buffer or barrier between the sidewalk and the bike lane, so the pedestrians still felt safe walking on the streets too, and that they didn't feel like someone was gonna swerve around them and possibly hit them. So that was, the buffer was implemented in that.
So some quick solutions here for intersection treatments. They talked about intersection treatments at 257th, and as Marley mentioned earlier, some quick solutions would be some additional paint for advanced stop bars, just providing more bike crossing in addition to the pedestrian crossings, as you can see the green hash marks on this visual here on this slide. Making sure that the signals at that location could be better for pedestrians as well. And then the plan also talked about some design implementation for driveways and different treatments for driveways that would be better for bicyclists and pedestrians, and also cars. And how different treatments could be used at driveway locations to ensure that bikes and peds are seen. And then some design implementation for transit stops was also given in the plan. Most of the transit stops here in Troutdale will be those in-lane stops. But looking at different, bike shelters, and making sure that, the bike lane could jog or narrow in these areas to ensure transit users can get safely on the bus or out of the bus. And then design implementation for planting and stormwater. As Marley mentioned, there's a lot of talk about landscaping and what that would look like along the corridor and planting strips and rain gardens. And lastly, the design implementation talks about crossings. The plan talks about refuge islands on 3-lane sections of road and creating those, flashing beacons for people to use as they cross. It talks about curb extensions and the benefits of curb extensions. It reduces the crossing distance for pedestrians, but it also increases the visibility for people and motor vehicles to see pedestrians at intersections. And then you can also have curb extensions with rain gardens as well. So it provides kind of that multi-purpose use if you wanted to incorporate some green infrastructure. So the near term crossing that we really want to focus on is 257th, but in the entire segments that we have within Troutdale, the Edgefield segment, the residential segment, and the commercial segment, there are a total of 4 enhanced crossings in that area. So the plan talks about elements of continuity along Halsey. And like I said, this is just a concept plan. None of this is, set in stone, but there will be additional conversations down the road, no pun intended. But the plan does talk about, benches and, bike racks and, different things along the entire Halsey corridor, those place-making aspects. So when people are using the corridor, they know kind of where they are. Anything to add?
I think that it's worth adding that there's a lot of conversation as well around having certain things of continuity, but ways that each of our cities could customize certain elements of those pieces to feel unique to our own areas. So, maybe we have the brown from our branding as one of our colors, and then Wood Village has the green, and then Fairview has the blue, and they all might be the same bench, but the bench's color is different in each, or whatever it might be. So thinking about ways that we can keep the continuity and flow going along the whole corridor while still recognizing that we are 3 individual towns with our own unique identities.
So getting into the cost estimates, so the plan did put together cost estimates for the near-term costs, so the near-term solutions for the 3.5 mile corridor and for each of the 3 cities. And then the plan also puts together the long-term cost estimates for improvement along the corridor. And I just want to reemphasize, this is a Multnomah County minor arterial roadway. It's their road. Getting to plan implementation and how that would look over time. There's, really 2 different ways we can look at this plan implementation. I want to start from the beginning. First, the county needs to change their design plans for Halsey. And in order for them to change their design plans for this roadway, they need support from all 3 cities. And so that's why we're here tonight, to give them the support that they need to change their roadway standards. And then as changes could occur over time, 2 ways: incrementally as properties develop over time, or the county could put this on a capital improvement project list for different segments and go after regional money, state money, and federal money. But in order to do that, we have to have a plan first. So like I said, this is conceptual and this is the very first step. So with that, we're here. We have Multnomah County Transportation staff online, as well as Matt Bell from Kittleson.
All right, any comments or questions from council? First off, thank you. That was a good presentation. Councilor Glantz.
Yeah, I have a bunch of questions. Just want to be clear on a couple things. I noticed in the presentation, it talks about building height and bulk. Yeah, and it talks about how Fairview and Wood Village added height, but Troutdale didn't. That would still be the case, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Second question is, I appreciate this is Multnomah County's road, but I thought I saw Troutdale and some dollar figures. So would any of the funding for this come from Troutdale as well as the county?
I think there's going to be a lot of different conversations about, funding packages in the future. I'm gonna let the county, Brad or Allison kind of chime in, or even if Matt wants to chime in on that question.
I can chime in. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. I am Allison Boyd. I'm Transportation Planning Manager with Multnomah County. I do think this is, like Erica was mentioning, this is kind of a beginning stage of providing this concept of what we're looking at and these high-level cost estimates. And this is going to give us a really great baseline to start looking at how could we actually implement this. And so the county is looking forward to, as each of the cities adopt this plan and we get this new direction on where East County cities would like to go with the Halsey corridor, of being able to start working on an implementation strategy and looking at different funding opportunities that would be available. So I think there's, potential that there'll be more grant opportunities, but we'll have to see kind of what those are coming up that we could look at. And then just kind of being able to work on a plan. It would, anything that we would be needing to implement on this would probably need to be happening in segments. I think if you look at the plan, there's some really large dollar amounts for kind of complete implementation. And so that's why it's great that we have those interim designs that we could look at, as well as kind of segmented sections that we could look at for different funding opportunities in the future. But I think, that's something we'll just have to have a lot more conversations on as we move forward.
So why is it broken up by city? Or are you saying that, yes, cities would have a financial contribution for this to happen as well?
I don't think we've talked about any kinds of contribution levels from any jurisdiction yet, but Matt might be able to answer the reasoning why it was broken up into cities, but I would imagine that was just to be able to show some different cost estimate segments. Matt, do you have more information on that?
Yeah, exactly what you said. Is it really just to be able to show like roughly what the cost would be within each city, not for each city? We also have a similar cost estimate. You can see there on some of those for like just the segment that impacts Edgefield's property. So we could see from a property basis, we have it as far down as like a linear foot basis. So we know theoretically what the frontage improvement cost would be for an individual property, a property like Edgefield, or all the properties within the city of Troutdale.
And what about maintenance on some of that? You've mentioned that in some cases it would be the landowner's responsibility based on the way that it was laid out with the break between the road and the sidewalk.
If you're looking for me, I might turn it back to the city to answer that question.
Well, it's probably a good question for the county. So county, feel free to jump in and chime in on any of that at any point. But the way that like maintenance is done on
Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Watch out for the
So
hole.
far.
That'll wake you up. The way that maintenance is done on, like maintaining for a landscaping strip now is that the adjacent property owner is responsible for maintaining a landscaping strip adjacent to their property. And so, you know, we might have planter strips in front of our homes and we have to take care of the trees or the grass or whatever that might be. And so that standard would still remain for this road, that the planter strip that is in front of your property would be maintained by that property owner. With the sidewalks, the same thing applies. Adjacent property owners are responsible for maintaining a clear sidewalk adjacent to their property. So same standard would apply for that. And this is simply moving that bike lane over adjacent to that. And I think that there's still some conversation with the county of like what all that entails and whatnot, but I believe that maintenance being, or like moving it changes the maintenance structure of that. And so maybe Allison or Brad can jump in for further details.
I don't know if Brad and Allison are actually going to have additional details, but I know that in the plan document itself, it does talk about how additional conversations around that issue will have to occur between the county and the city and property owners.
Yeah, and with that statement that is in the plan around additional conversations of maintenance, that was specifically included because all three of the cities did stress how maintenance has come up a number of times in each of our communities, and that we want an extremely clear understanding of who is responsible for what before we construct anything. So I think that was really in there to highlight that whether we need to have some sort of an agreement between the county and the cities or some other measure of just basically laying out on paper
who does what.
You're responsible for this, you're responsible for this, and it's a clear understanding. Like that was basically what came out of it, is that we all decided we want really clear, before anything gets constructed, really clear understanding of who is responsible for what.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Glantz. Any other comments or questions from council? Councilor White.
Yeah, I'm just curious, we just had some big projects go in on Halsey, and I know when we did Eagle Ridge, they had to create a whole new lane even, and they did all their own sidewalks. It didn't cost taxpayers anything, so I'm wondering why that didn't occur. Some of these big apartment complexes that have gone in.
What do you mean by why that didn't occur? Like why the plan didn't get implemented, or why they covered construction costs of those?
We required that for Eagle Ridge, but we didn't require it for these recent ones on a road that needed improvement.
Is there a specific one that you're referring to? Sorry, I don't want to just
I don't
like.
know the names of them, but I mean.
An intersection, maybe?
No, on Halsey.
No, I know Eagle Ridge is on Halsey, but you said there was another apartment.
Oh, the one across from Safeway,
Yeah,
Eagle Ridge.
One of the differences with Eagle Ridge is that it was a conditional use because the property wasn't technically zoned for it, so we could put that additional requirement by allowing it. Remember, it was zoned for a trailer park and other things such as that, so it was kind of an improvement to get Eagle Ridge, but it was a conditional use, and so we had to go through that. So we had a little leverage on them to add that extra turn lane.
And in order to do it in something that's not a conditional use, it has to be in the city's code. The plan has to be adopted first, and then you can do it.
Yeah, so any of the new developments that have occurred on Halsey in the last couple of years have been constructing to the existing Multnomah County standards for the road. Because this plan is not an adopted standard for the county, we can't ask them to do something different. Hypothetically, we could potentially do like a payment in lieu of until such time as we have an updated plan. I mean, that happens a lot in downtown. Like sometimes when the new downtown developments happen and we know that we have those curb extensions coming, we'll have them do a payment system where they're paying for the improvements, but they're not constructing them, and that helps us cover those costs when we do go to do them. In the instance of the new developments that have constructed these improvements, I don't think that we're planning on ripping any of those out anytime soon. So I don't think that the plan is to completely reinvent the wheel in those sections. It's just to have something for moving forward. So, yeah.
And then, is there a lot of infrastructure alongside Halsey currently? Like, I imagine there's sewer and storm drains. Is that all gonna have to be moved when they widen the road?
Potentially, I think that the county does the stormwater management on Halsey and in addition to which there's some instances where we have one and they have the other. So that's an instance where they have both of those. And I don't know the full, Travis is here and the county is here, so maybe they could speak on that more, but potentially things could have to be moved around. It really depends. I think it's gonna be a case-by-case basis of what the exact right-of-way looks like and if sections need to be improved or not improved.
I think, and that'll be really be dialed in once, you know, there is a particular project that needs to be designed. And when that occurs, there's usually a new set of project objectives for that design.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, one of the project objectives will be to look at the existing infrastructure to make sure that it doesn't need to be moved, so there aren't increased costs to that project. There's some value engineering that goes into
I'm
play.
just concerned at what kind of disruption that's gonna cause
Yeah.
for our businesses. First, we're gonna do a short-term fix, and then a long-term, which is pretty extensive if you look at it.
Well, this is a long range plan.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the other things that I wanted to know, I think Allison was talking about this a little bit earlier, and then you brought up the different developments that come in. Right now, public improvements are triggered by the redevelopment of a site. So that's why we sort of have this quilt work of sidewalks and not sidewalks on Halsey, because certain properties have gotten developed and then the one across the street hasn't been developed. And so that's why it looks the way it does. And I think that when we start to talk about what we're actually going to go seek grants for, we'll probably be looking at the highest need sections of the corridor. The Edgefield section came up so much during our public engagement process as safety improvements needing, like the community desperately wants safety improvements in that section of the road. And so I think that, you know, we look at the cost of all of this and it's broken down. One of the things it doesn't necessarily say, it's broken down by city, but it doesn't say, well, this is the whole share for the county or anything like that. So that's just a jurisdictional thing that it's showing that. But then there's also what development triggers improvement and the developers of those sites actually paying into these improvements as well. And that's something that's not really perfectly captured in this, is what costs they would incur in order to develop within our communities.
Okay. And then, so planning didn't endorse this plan. What were their thoughts? I was sat in on the meeting, but I was surprised they didn't act on it. And was it similar to the Halsey corridor plan that they rejected in lieu of doing a more personalized approach for Troutdale?
During the meeting with Planning Commission last month, like I said in the presentation, they were overall very supportive of this plan. You know, they provided additional input on, you know, we really need to focus on lighting. We really need to, you know, focus on some of the near-term, you know, safety solutions along the corridor. It wasn't put forward in front of Planning Commission to make a recommendation to council because we didn't need an ordinance and we didn't need to change anything in our transportation system plan, because our transportation system plan that's currently adopted already references the improvements along Halsey.
Yeah, it specifically references the Main Street on Halsey plan as the improvements we should adopt and have along Halsey Street.
But we didn't hear anything negative from the commission in any manner.
Yeah, and we didn't specifically ask for an endorsement, so it wasn't like it wasn't like they didn't endorse it and that should be seen as a negative response to it. It was just that we didn't ask for the endorsement. We brought it to them so that they could be aware. And we felt that it was really important that Planning Commission get a full presentation on the project and understand how this could impact surrounding developments and land uses. And it was really more to have a conversation and make sure that their opinions were on the record and we could document them before coming before you all for the, what's the formal text?
Resolution.
Resolution. Resolution to accept, yes.
Just if you want to think about it in the hierarchy, ordinances that exist, like the transportation system plan, are administered by resolutions. So this is kind of a subset of the existing ordinances, moving towards eventually adopting more ordinances to really flesh it all out. This just says, let's move forward to get the ordinances put together.
Yeah, I got that. Thanks. Yeah, I agree, something needs to happen. I think it'd be a nice amenity for the city to have, it definitely would be safer. I cringe at concert night watching what goes on that road, and, you know, it's a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, or used to maybe it's 40 now, but no lighting.
Yeah. It would be nice for our residents to feel safe walking to the concerts and like they don't have to drive a car or could ride a bike or take the bus, so.
And I've read that on some social media comments too, on the Troutdale social media page.
Yeah, we post road impact notices every time there's a concert, and there are lively conversations about the impact.
Sorry for asking so many questions.
No,
I was
no.
on Halsey Corridor Executive Committee for like 3.5 years, so I kind of know a lot of the background. And, you know, we were all excited about Edgefield proposed that they wanted to do their own, you know, they don't like cookie cutter stuff. They want to be unique and artistic, and they had talked about doing a pathway, and they were going to use 20 feet of their own property and have it like wind through trees, and it sounded great, and I think it would have been even better than this plan. So did they chime in? I know you brought it up briefly at the planning commission meeting, but, you know, if this is such a long ways off, I'm wondering if we shouldn't reach out again to Edgefield or see if they would really be willing to do that, you know, especially if we worked with them. Because their idea, I think, was really good. I mean, it's not what engineers would think of, but I think it would match what they've already got. They've already got such a unique business going on over there, and it's very popular. And I just would hate to miss that opportunity.
Yeah, so we met with McMenamins on multiple occasions, but we specifically had a meeting with the county, you know, everyone who needed to be there to have a conversation, and presented them what we had heard from the community. We specifically pulled all of the comments related to Edgefield and put it into a little one-sheeter. And then we showed them what the plan was to receive their feedback on it. I think one of the things that the county wanted to stress in this is that, you know, for years, we've given them the opportunity to present something unique or different. The county has been really flexible in saying, if you want to do a different public improvement, show us what that public improvement is and we'll review it. But they've never presented anything. And therefore the county has nothing that they can go off of and say, oh yeah, they showed us that. Like, I mean, they talk about ideas for boardwalks and winding sidewalks, but they've never put anything on paper and like presented it to them. And in addition to that, the county heard from the community and felt very strongly that no single property owner should receive any preferential treatment in regard to the design or implementation of the plan. And so while they may be like the largest continuous property owner along the corridor, you know, safety is first and foremost in the design of the plan, and the continuous sidewalks and bike lanes, and making sure that the community can navigate that whole area. And so instead of trying to craft something that is different in that area or really flexible or unique, just wasn't the best for all of the property owners along the corridor. And in addition to that, the other thing I was going to say is that we really sort of, as we had this conversation with them, I sort of described it as a coloring book. We've given them a blank coloring book, and we're saying, these are the lines, and you can color within them. But if you want to do something unique or creative or special, you can color it however you want to color it. But these are the like requirements.
Parameters.
These are the parameters. And so they can design the coolest bus stop in America, or, you know, a landscaping plan that is exactly what their interest, you know,
Yeah, I'd
lies.
just add a couple things. One, McMinimum's has been involved in the Halsey Street Committee since the very beginning.
Yes.
And they have had lots of opportunities for input and involvement in this plan. I had lunch with Mike McMiniman about 2 years ago. Their primary interest is that whatever is done to Halsey doesn't look, like she said, cookie cutter, doesn't look like a 5-lane, you know, Gleason or Stark or something. They want something that is compatible with a country feel, because they're thinking of doing housing areas and agriculture on the north side. And so and I told them at lunch, you know, if you want something in particular, make sure the county knows what you want, or come up with the concept design and give it to the county before we get to this far. So they were aware 2 years ago they should do that. I just think, in looking at what's been proposed here conceptually and what the McMinimans have told me, this seems to meet their bill. This seems to be generally what, you know, they would be comfortable with, considering the wide access for pedestrians and bikes along the side. And for all of us, a turn lane in the center of Halsey would sure be nice.
Yeah. And in this conversation with McMenamins, the whole country road conversation did come up. And the other thing that I brought attention to was that is a great vision to have for their property, but this is within an incorporated city. It is within the Portland metropolitan. I mean, like, we are within a city and not up the hill in Corbett. And it technically isn't a country road. It's a county road that's within an incorporated city. And so there are certain standards that they're just going to be held to the same way that any other developer or development within our cities would be held to. And that if they want to make changes, I mean, I think that the landscaping really provides a good opportunity for them to get a little bit more creative. If they don't, you know, when you see the bird's eye view of the plan, it shows tree, 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 tree. Maybe they don't propose any trees right in front of the manor house because they want to maintain the view of the manor house. These are all fine things that they can propose. We just need to hear what they want to propose and how they want to get creative with it. And I don't think it's difficult for us to imagine they could do boardwalks off of the sidewalk that meander through the property and go all the way up to the golf course. It's just that, you know, then it's on their private property.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Councilor Rittman.
Well, yes, just following on to, I guess it would be Ray's comment. What I liked is that Multnomah County, when they widened a road, used to do a Stark Street, you know, 5-lane curb sidewalk, no separation, maybe a painted bike lane, but that's it. A quite unattractive proposal. And now this is a minor arterial. I don't know how many we have in Troutdale, but we've really got only one stretch, 257th, that's like that. And even down the hill, I think we insisted on having the planting strip down that stretch. And I think the county is really listening if they're willing to amend their standards for minor arterial expansion or improvement to this kind of thing. I couldn't find anything I didn't like. It all looks pretty good, so. I am worried about the money, but that sounds like that's down the road. So it's a county road. Let's hope the county will just take care of it.
Let's hope. Don't hold your breath. Councilor Glantz.
I have a follow-up question. In reading through this, I didn't notice anywhere that it said something along the lines of, we chose this because it's more cost effective. Was that ever a consideration, or was it just, this would be the coolest thing to do I mean, when we're talking about, moving parts of streets and underground utilities, those kind of things seem pretty important in the overall cost. And even though it's not, going to be Troutdale money, it's still public taxpayer money that I feel like we should be a little bit more proactive about spending in an efficient manner.
I think Matt might be really well equipped to answer this, but I will also point out that this is the 10% designs. So we don't really know where those areas in the street are yet that we could potentially be moving things. And there is a lot of room for cost savings to come down the road. Like, should we have some very expensive thing that comes up, like coming up with those adjustments. But Matt, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I can just add that cost was a consideration, and as Erica alluded to earlier, we had 7 different project objectives that we were trying to achieve. Within each of those objectives, we had a number of criteria, and among those was consideration to the cost. But whenever that gets factored in with a variety of other things, like as safe, there's like, safety component, there's the environmental component, there's like all these other things that we're trying to achieve in terms of like connectivity and slowing vehicular traffic and so on and so forth. It's one of the factors that are considered, but it's not enough of a factor that is driving the decision.
Any other comments or questions from council? I'm going to open it up to public comment. Public comment on agenda item number 5, a resolution accepting the main streets on Halsey Cross Section and street design plan is open. If you are on Zoom and wish to make public comment, go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record. Okay, not seeing anybody and not seeing any member of the public except for staff in council chambers. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. So we have a resolution upon us. Any other comments or questions or discussions or concerns or anything? I'll wait for Councilor Rittman to get back. Okay. Yeah, Councilor White.
I saw that $18.5 million figure you showed for Troutdale's share. By passing this, are we locking ourselves into anything like that? Any commitment?
No.
Okay.
In unison. Okay.
No, that's a large amount of money. There'd be more conversations before we got to that point.
You did a good job, and I liked what you said, that we can keep our unique city feel, because I know you work so hard on the branding, and I love our branding, and I think it's better, I hate to say this, than what the other cities came up with. So I really want us to keep our look and our feel.
Yeah.
I like the example that was in the document. I don't know what page it was on. It's near the end, wasn't it?
I think page 43.
Was it page 43?
Was it the Halsey?
Yeah, Halsey.
District
Yep.
/ way /
Yeah, Halsey
Street.
District, Halsey East. I'll tell you that, Councilor White, I am in complete agreement with you that we have the best branding across the county. I can't. Anyways, I liked the branding that was in this because it is similar. It has the same feel. It matches.
I think you're referring to page 43 of 58 of the plan. I don't know what page that is in the packet.
Yeah, it is.
Is this the one?
Yes, that is the one.
Yeah, so we went through a corridor branding process as a part of this, and we worked with the same company that did our initial branding, and they also did Fairview's branding. This was to sort of have a unifying identity for the whole corridor, but then we also talked about ways in which you could have this, but then also identify which city you're in. So it would have Halsey Way the whole way, or Halsey East, or whatever. We didn't decide on a name. We have a lot of files because we could not decide on a name, but whatever the name is, and then each city also identified.
You find it?
That's all right. I trust you.
Let me see it really quick, because I want you to see it. It is, I like it, and I think it feels similar. And that's what I wanted to point out, that it feels similar, and I can see, you know, how it could, how it could,
I don't like the name district so much.
how it could work through all three cities, so I appreciate it. Well, 4 cities, East Portland too, I guess. Kinda, yeah? No? Gresham?
If we let them use the brand.
Yeah.
We might need to put in another trademark application over there. Once we decide on the name, of course.
Okay, Councilor Rittman, we've already had public comment. If there's any more comments or discussions, we have a resolution in front of us.
Any motion?
Well,
I'll make a motion that we adopt the resolution accepting the Main Street on Halsey Cross Section and street design plan.
Second.
All right.
Counselor Glantz.
No.
Counselor Rittman.
Yes.
Counselor Caswell.
Yes.
Counselor One.
Yes.
Mayor Lauer.
No.
Counselor White.
Yes.
And Counselor Witcher.
Yes.
Passes.
Passes. I'll just say, the reason why, the non-clear direction as to the responsibility of the maintenance, and I know it's only 10%, but that's a big question. It's a big question that could affect property owners, business owners, residential, you know, along the corridor, so, but it can only create improvements across the Halsey corridor, so it's exciting, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And we will make sure we continue to have those conversations around maintenance because we also feel that it's really important, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, good presentation, good work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, county staff, and Matt, appreciate your contributions to the discussion. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 5, a report on the first year of dogs being allowed in select parks. Mr. Holton, Public Works Director, and Mr. Jacobson, Parks Facility Superintendent. Thank you for, oh no.
All right.
Oh no. For all those at home, we've had a mishap.
All the important stuff's right here, securely in the 3-ring binder, where it won't get out of order. This is all this other random stuff. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. And for anyone out there that doesn't know, I'm Travis Holton, the Public Works Director and Chief Engineer for the city, and here with me today is Jonah Jacobson, our Park Superintendent. We're here today to talk about, just basically give you a follow-up report on the dogs in parks topic, which of course we talked a lot about earlier this year and even going back into the prior year. Those discussions kicked off in the fall around this time last year. And at that time, we were getting ready to open the off-leash dog park, and the council asked that us to come back in about a year and let you know how things are going. And so that's what we're here to do tonight. You all have our written report, which of course Jonah contributed to significantly. So I'm not going to go through it bit by bit, but I will kind of sum it up for you and then be happy to answer any questions. What we found overall is that these changes to allow dogs in the parks, which occurred back in the year, have on balance or overall been had a positive effect on the parks. Any negative effects we've seen are basically in the same vein as the kind of things we were seeing before that, because as I had mentioned in my report, and as you all know, prior to the council formally permitting dogs in parks, guess what? We had dogs in parks. We had lots of them, but they were already there. We know that any difficulties we've seen have pretty much been the same difficulties that we had prior to that. The violations that we see are, similar, people having dogs off leash, people not picking up after their dogs, those kinds of things. None of that's really changed. Really, all we're seeing is people using the parks more with their dogs and using the parks more in general. That the park staff have noticed that. And with that increased usage, those types of issues that I mentioned, we have seen an uptick in that, but because you have more people, so the same violations are occurring more. But it hasn't really caused any major problems that we've seen. Overall, the community's reaction to it has been positive. There are a few complaints, but mostly those complaints boil down to difficulties with enforcement. So what we're finding is people are generally happy that we're allowing dogs in parks. What they're unhappy about is that people aren't conducting themselves properly with their pets in the parks, and that we have a hard time enforcing that. So, you know, they like being allowed to bring their dog. They just don't like people that aren't keeping their dog on a leash or picking up after their dog or those kinds of things. As far as how it's impacted the maintenance staff, again, you know, before these changes were made, there were people taking their dogs to the park and not picking up after them. People are still doing that, and since more people are coming to the parks, we're seeing a little bit more of it. But the park staff, according to Jonah, it's not to a degree that it's causing a major burden on the staff or, you know, any increased, you know, major increase in their burden or being a drain on our resources. So all in all, you know, it seems like it's been generally a good thing, and it hasn't caused us any new problems, or just some of the same problems we had before, and maybe a little bit more because people are coming to the parks more. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right.
And Jonah will probably have to answer most of them. He's out there in the trenches day to day, every day.
Comments or questions? Councilor White?
Yeah, you know, I read that in the report that park participation is up. Is it dog owners, or is it just in general, more people are coming to the parks?
I can answer that. So that was a direct reply from parks workers when I asked them about changes that they've seen in general since the passage of these ordinances over the last year. And that was something that was repeated by more than one parks worker, was that they see more people out using the parks, and but they did not specify whether that was dog owners or not dog owners. So.
Yeah. I like reading that part, you know, that people are socializing and the dogs are too, and it usually makes for friendly dogs when they're used to being around other dogs. I think it's a important tool.
Yeah, I mean, Jonah and his folks are out there working hard every day. We love when people use the parks, and we want more of them out there. And whether it's because they can take their dog or not, we're happy to see them there.
You know, I was the one that asked for this follow-up, and I was really pleased with the report.
Oh, thank you.
Seems like it's working.
Much credit that to Jonah.
I'm wondering if we should, do you think we need to do this again? Because we just added that enforcement piece.
I mean, we're happy to come back and talk to you anytime, you know, about how things are going. You know, the enforcement.
They hear it quite fast,
yeah.
I gotta tell you.
It does, doesn't it? You know, the enforcement piece, the enforcement tools we just added are very important. That said, I mean, it's my hope that we don't have to use them a lot, you know. Like I talked about in the report, and like Jonah and I talked about in the report, what we found, and we're talking with the OPS folks, and for those that don't know, Oregon Patrol Services provided some security services at some parks, some of the time, over the summer, including looking after dog issues that might be going on out there. They did not have the ability to fine people or anything during this past summer. That was a more recent ordinance. But what they found is that, and I think the park staff have said similar things, that when they see people with dogs off leash, for instance, and say, hey, you know, you got to put that dog on a leash. Most of the time, they do it, you know. So those fines that we have the ability to do now are really for the folks that are just obstinate and just refuse to comply or conduct themselves properly, even when they've been told to do so and reminded to do so, you know. And we do see those folks, you know. The parks workers too, you know, their enforcement's really not their what they're out there for, but they do try to be take more of a maybe an ambassador approach, you know, where they'll see someone maybe with a dog off leash and say, hey, you know, you're not supposed to have your dog off leash, and could you please put it on a leash? They're not going to get into a major confrontation with someone. They're not trained for that, but they will remind people and ask them politely, and most of the time people comply, you know. But you have some people that will just say, you can't do anything about it, you know, forget you, I don't care, I'm gonna do what I want, you know, and those are the folks where, you know, they might have to pay a visit to municipal court, you know, when we have our enforcement folks out there.
Great, thanks.
Any other comments or questions from council? Nothing? All right, I'm gonna open it up to public comment. We do have a couple people in Zoom. So public comment's now open on the report on the first year of dogs being allowed in select parks. If you wish to make public comment, go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record, please.
Paul Wilcox, Troutdale.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mayor. I read the entire staff report in detail, and I thought it was very well written. It was comprehensive and unbiased.
Thank you.
The only thing I might add is maybe start a database for repeat offenders. Because people, first time people are called out, they're going to say they didn't know any better. They didn't know. They plead ignorance. But you know, when you get people off leash in particular doing it over and over and over again, I think the fine would be appropriate. So that's also a county violation, by the way.
Right. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I think part of that comes down to how enforcement personnel, they have an approach to doing their job. So if you have the same enforcement personnel in a park over and over again, they're gonna recognize people that they see over and over again. It's hard to track people unless you actually cite them, because if you're going to track them, then you're gonna have to say, you know, demand a CID and things like that, and that becomes a confrontational situation and gets people's defenses up. So unless it gets up to a citation, I wouldn't expect to keep a record of people's, you know, names or things like that. But enforcement personnel will know if they're, you know, well, I know I've told this guy now 3 times, you know, in the past to put his dog on a leash, and so it's time to cite him, you know. And once that happens, then we absolutely will be keeping track of them, because the ordinance, as you may recall, has a habitual offender provision. If you're cited a 3rd time for the same violation, the fines go way up. So certainly we'll be keeping track of those folks, but I think for the you know, day-to-day, you know, warning someone, and especially if they comply, we're typically not going to demand to see their identification and be able to keep track of them in that way.
If I may, I agree, Paul. The vast majority of the time, the you know, a simple reminder is sufficient with most people. That being said, I do have a very small database of my own of faces, and so there are a couple of people that I have seen. But it is a good idea, and thank you for your input.
All right, any other comments on Zoom? Okay, not seeing anybody, I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment. If there's nothing else from council?
No, thanks. That really is, I'm glad to see it's working.
Thank you
All
all.
right. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 6, staff communications. Mr. Ray Young.
Thank you, Mayor. As I announced at the last council meeting, we were looking to arrange a BESS battery farm, the 200 megawatt facility that we now have in the city, and we are looking to do it on October 23rd or October 30th at 9 in the morning. So if you're interested in doing the tour, please let Erica know by Friday. Either email me, email Erica directly and say, yes, I can do either the 23rd or the 30th, or I can only do one or the other, whatever you can do. We just need to want to make that arrangement so you get a chance to take a tour of the battery farm out there. Number 2, Planning Commission will be meeting tomorrow night. The primary issue they'll be trying to figure out is Mike Halstead's development of a bunch of units up on 257th, right before you get to the high school. It's been an orphan lot for many, many years, and so he's going to be coming for his approval tomorrow night. So you can, again, always watch the meeting, learn from it, but try not to make comments, because you might be influential in the Planning Commission decisions, or you might get it on an appeal. So number 3, remember, you've been emailed. On Thursday at 1:30, we will be doing the groundbreaking for the Sandy Riverfront Trail. All the contracts are signed. The contractors are getting lined up and getting ready to do it. So we're going to have a groundbreaking at 1:30. Immediately following, we're going to walk under I-84 bridge and go up Harlow and do a ribbon cutting for the Chuck Chuck Trail, which has now all been paved and is a wonderful trail. So Thursday, I'd love to have you join us from 1:30 to 3. We're gonna be meeting behind the Outlet Mall in the northeast corner there, where the trail comes over the bridge. So that's number 3, and that's on Thursday. And finally, just to give those who are involved more time to campaign, I guess, we're gonna be canceling the October 22nd council meeting. We just don't have enough important stuff that we need to have a whole meeting on it, and everything can fit on the November 12th agenda. So we just freed you up on October 22nd to do whatever you want to do 2 weeks for the election. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, council communications, Councilor Glantz.
Good luck to everyone out there campaigning, and just kind of a fun item to share. I heard about just before this meeting from someone, and it's true, the city of Melbourne in Australia allows you to email a tree. They have 70,000 trees, and you can email any one of them. The original intention was to let residents say, oh my God, you know, there's some kind of problem with this tree. But now visitors, people who live there literally start, you know, writing compliments to the trees and, you know, oh, I'm, you know, met my future spouse under the shade of this tree. It's pretty fun. So that's it.
Councilor Caswell.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Okay, Councilor Rittmer.
On October 20th, Sunday, October 20th, the Troutdale Historical Society is hosting a program at 2 o'clock at the Sam Cox Building in Glen Island Park. It's about the Columbus Day storm. And that was the biggest storm in Oregon history, I think. Anyway, I was not here in Troutdale at the time, but I have an old farmhouse, and the big barn on my property blew down. And it was in 1962, not expecting a whole lot of people who were around then. Troutdale
I remember, as a 3-year-old, in my mind's eye, I remember looking out the window and seeing the wind howling through my front yard.
Come and tell the story. Okay?
I remember it.
But we are you know, asking if anyone happens to have pictures of local interest, but we'll have a program that night or that afternoon on the 20th of October, and it's free, and please come if you can. And that's all I have.
Okay, Councilor One.
I got nothing.
All right, Councilor White.
Yeah, I'll be going to the 99th League of Oregon City event. It's in Bend this year. So and I've gone to every single one since I've been on council, and I always get a good takeaway from it. One of my missions is going to be to talk to ODFW about why we didn't get a harvest smelt this year. So, because it was the biggest run I ever have seen in 34 years of living here. So I'll check into that. And I wanted to thank Ray. I'm excited about the trail dedication. I know he probably had to work really hard with the railroad. They can be a tough customer to deal with, so I know it was hours and hours of conversations, and they'll be at the League of Oregon Cities too, so I'll make sure I thank them.
Ray is the fellow who deserves the kudos.
Okay.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, Eric, means a lot of people who really
Okay.
schmoozed the railroad for years. I've been part of it, others been part of it, so it takes time, and it's like dealing with another country.
Yep.
It really is.
I understand. That's all I have.
Councilor Wittry.
Nothing here.
I guess happy Halloween, because we won't see anybody until November, so that's all I got.
Is that it? I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I